What will be interesting is to actually see Bitcoin used as a mean of payments. So then we can actually see Bitcoin becoming, the future money, right? Where for now it's kind of like more from an investment speculation. He has got his use cases, but I think what we really need is like mass adoption and use of these assets. So I'm curious to see what is going to happen with all these technology and layer 2. They're kind of scaling the network to see how Bitcoin can push boundaries. So that's kind of like what I'm expecting to see in 2025.
So I think we're entering a golden era for Bitcoin on two accords. One, with US policies we discussed with the new administration backed by Trump, and two, on the technology front, all these layer 2 projects. I've traveled the world in the last year, and everywhere, whether we're in Frankfurt or Lugano or Hong Kong for that matter, there's so many interesting layer 2 projects on Bitcoin that are all trying to drive adoption. There's ZK rollups on Bitcoin right now, which is really interesting. You look at the advent of apps like Instagram and Uber and all these day-to-day things that require so much data and location services on your phone. And so I think once those consumer behaviors change, there will be a massive influx of adoption of cryptocurrency. So I really look forward to a golden era of Bitcoin.
Welcome back to the Financial Fox. Steffi here, ready to bring you another great interview where we discuss crypto, AI and investment. Joining us today is Aydin Kilic, CEO and President of HIVE Digital Technologies, to discuss HIVE latest update and what lies ahead for 2025. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Aydin. Before we get into the interview, a couple of things. If you are watching but you are not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please take a moment to do so. Your support is crucial to grow the channel so we can educate more people about crypto. Second, remember that the content on the show is for informational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Any opinion expressed by me or my guests are ours alone, and you should not act solely on the back of them. As always, do your own research, level up your skills and be accountable for your own decision. With that being said, a quick word about HIVE Digital Technologies, which is also our sponsor. Before we dive into today's interview, I'd like to introduce you to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies, a publicly listed company building the next generation data center infrastructure with 100% renewable energy. HIVE was the first crypto miner to go public and the first one to have an AI strategy. With over 2,600 Bitcoin on their balance sheet and operations in Canada, Sweden, Iceland and Paraguay, HIVE is fully committed to transforming communities, rebalancing the energy grid and delivering value to shareholders with a low dilution and cash focus approach. If you don't know HIVE, check them out at HIVEdigitaltechnologies.com. Now, let's get straight into my conversation with Aydin. Hi Aydin, how are you doing?
I'm great. Everything's coming up Bitcoin.
Oh gosh, I love it. Love the glasses. Listen, 2025 is going to be great for crypto. Everyone is watching the US now with Trump in the office, and there is a growing optimism for all the supportive crypto policies they are talking about. So what are your expectations for his administration?
Well, I think he's had a really strong narrative. Off the top of my head, Gensler being out is great because he's just perpetually, I think, been thorn in the side of really, I think, thoughtful policymakers in the US. You look at the CFTC and they would show up at the Bitcoin conferences and learn. And I thought that they were great. And so I think by having the right individuals behind the policy is where we're going to get somewhere. And Trump, as head of state for the US, he's saying all the right things, and I believe that he's going to put things into motion, because this is his second term. The first term he was kind of learning how things worked out, figured out the politics in the swamp. Now I think he's really gonna come in and make some changes, because A, he knows how the system works, and B, it's been painfully apparent how much currency debasement there's been in the US in the wake of the trillions of dollars of money printing. And so now more than ever, it stands where Bitcoin is the world's energy-backed decentralized currency, which, who knows, maybe that becomes a US reserve currency. So I'm pretty pumped. You can see it in my eyes, Stefania.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see it from your from your eye. So Bitcoin means different things from different people. What does Bitcoin mean to you, personally and professionally?
I think that always the first word that comes to mind is energy-backed, decentralized currency. And I know that may be not the most popular way to describe it, but I think it's a very accurate way to describe it. People often gloss over or fail to grasp the importance of it being energy-backed, right? So it's a digital asset, and you can calculate down to the joule of energy, how much resources are required to create a true value, i.e. a cost to produce a Bitcoin. And because of the way that Bitcoin is structured with the network hash rate and self-adjusting difficulty, it fluctuates with time, but it creates there's a real value, and moreover the ongoing scarcity is we have a halving event every 4 years. And I think Michael Saylor recently said that all the Bitcoin he buys, he's just going to sort of like throw away the keys, or I read something like that, like he wants to make the supply even more scarce, you know. So I mean, don't quote me on that, but did you hear that similarly as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's obviously what is happening with MicroStrategy and kind of like many other companies, they are following, his approach is really interesting. Now we have got government as well. They want to make, Bitcoin, strategic reserves. So it's gonna be really interesting. I think what is like key now, Bitcoin, obviously you mentioned about energy, but is really well established as store of value. What will be interesting is to actually see Bitcoin used as a mean of payments. So then we can actually see Bitcoin becoming, the future money, right? Where for now it's kind of like more from an investment speculation. He has got his use cases, but I think what we really need is like mass adoption and use of these assets. So I'm curious to see what is going to happen with all these technology and layer 2. They are kind of scaling the network.
Yeah.
To see how Bitcoin can push boundaries. So that's kind of like what I'm expecting to see in 2025.
I think we're entering a golden era for Bitcoin on two accords. One, with US policies we discussed with the new administration backed by Trump, and two, on the technology front, all these layer 2 projects. I've traveled the world in the last year, and everywhere, whether we're in Frankfurt or Lugano or Hong Kong for that matter, there's so many interesting layer 2 projects on Bitcoin that are all trying to drive adoption. There's ZK rollups on Bitcoin right now, which is really interesting. And so I think as these projects are starting to get critical mass and funding, and the technology is sound, and of course, we saw the big rush with ordinals and all the stuff that Casey Rodamore was doing. It was putting data on the Bitcoin blockchain, I think, was pivotal. Sure, the application was novel in that you're putting the images with the wizards, etc. But what more importantly is that you're able to store information on the Bitcoin blockchain. I know that's divisive in the core community, but I'm not here to comment on that, but really just look at I used to be a radio frequency engineer, so the cell phone, right? The cell phone that we use, that 100 gigabytes of data per month is what my plan is now. A few years ago it was 20 gigabytes. A few years before that, if you said you had 1 gigabyte of data on your phone, like, that's insane. How can you use so much data? Well, what was the first cell phone you had? Did you ever have a flip phone, Stefania? A Motorola Razr?
Oh, the Motorola, yes, that's the one that I wanted.
It was a tiny screen with a crappy camera. It was voice, and if you're lucky, we used what was called GPRS back then. And then that evolved to Edge. I actually did my undergraduate thesis on Edge. It was 2.5G. You start sending a little bit more data, and then you got into 3G, right? And I remember when I was an RF engineer, we were developing the technology to something called HSDPA, and that was the precedent for 4G. There was no use case. I remember being in the laboratory with the other engineers, and I'm like, who's even using this stuff? Like, we're building high bandwidth cellular technology, and I thought, like, is this for, like, people in Japan on the subway that want to watch TV on their cell phone? Like, we just didn't get it. And then the iPhone came out, and everything changed like that, because the user behaviors changed, because we had the application layer, right? So I see all these layer 2 technologies as paving the way for more different use cases, and something's going to come along where, I mean, it's already happening sort of more at the enthusiast and technologist level, but something will happen where it will just hit the masses. You know, you look at the advent of apps like Instagram and Uber and all these day-to-day things that require so much data and location services on your phone. And so I think once those consumer behaviors change, there will be a massive influx of adoption of cryptocurrency. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I really look forward to a golden era of Bitcoin being ushered in on that accord.
Listen, give me some update about HIVE, because we had you on the show 5 months ago, so that I think that was around July, August, and we did a masterclass on the intersection of Bitcoin mining and AI, which was very interesting. But there have been quite a few developments, and I would like maybe to go through them together, so you know, investors and everybody watching can have a good overview of the great milestone that you have achieved over the last few months.
With HIVE, I think it's going to be an absolutely stellar year because we made some big milestone announcements. First of all, our landmark purchase to get us to 15 exahash, which we've secured with an 8.5 exahash order of Bitmain S21 plus hydros. Additionally, we ordered the Canaan new A-series miner to upgrade our existing 30 joule per terahash fleet. So an upgrade of our existing air-cooled fleet and an expansion in Paraguay with the hydro miners. And by the way, we were in Paraguay and we went to see the Bitmain solution working in the field, and we were very impressed. So we're very excited about taking that next step to get to 15 exahash. And our own site, which is 100 megawatts, will get us a big part of the way there. And so with that site, with our site, because we just hit 6 exahash, our upgrades, as our upgrades with the Canaan air-cooleds come in the next month, February and March 2025, we'll get about to 6.8 exahash. And I'm giving you, fairly specific numbers here, right? I'm sure you have a lot of keen and enthusiastic listeners. And the reason why that increases from 6 to 6.8 is because, again, this is an upgrade. Like, we're taking 100 terahash machines and upgrading them to 190 terahash. So, on a like-per-like replacement, you're getting a net increase of only 90 terahash, which is still substantial. But the big improvement is you're going from 30 joules a terahash down to 16 joules a terahash, right? So that really improves our break-even as a company while incrementally growing our hash rate, number one. That's for this quarter.
Can I ask you a tricky one here? Because the Halving is definitely an important event for miners, and I know that you are very careful to actually prepare for it. And so after the 2032 Halving, each block mine rewards less than 1 Bitcoin. So what are HIVE plans to maintain profitability and grow your hash rate?
Well, the first answer to maintain profitability is to strategically upgrade our fleet to improve our break even. And how you do that is you identify the machines with the lowest efficiency in your fleet. And these are usually the machines that have been running for 2 years and they've paid themselves off and they've been cash flowing. But now as they approach their break even, and when there's really good deals in the market, like I don't think we were allowed to put in our press release, but we got a phenomenal deal with Canaan. And we got a phenomenal deal with Bitmain. I mean, $14 a terahash, we were allowed to press release that. And so for the upgrades, you want immediate order, machine ship immediately when you pay for them, and upgrade the existing fleet to improve your efficiency, right? Because efficiency is measured in joules per terahash. So 30 joules of energy per terahash versus, say, 16 or 18 joules per terahash, using 40% less energy to generate that same unit of hash. So less energy consumed. Energy is your input, so less energy required for the same output means you've got a better break even. So that's that component. Now, the 100 megawatts in Paraguay, that is a new frontier. That is a new site. And I want to tweet some photos because the civil work is nearly done. We're right next to the substation. I was just there in December. It's really exciting. Then we start laying down these containers, and that is going to add another 6 exahash or so. So basically by summer of this year, we'll be at almost 13 exahash because we will have completed our first 100 megawatts. And to get to the 15, there's some expansion in Paraguay that'll get us incrementally to the 15 exahash. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so that means that basically that's kind of like your preparation route for the next halving, making sure that you are efficient as possible and then you have grown
Oh yeah, I
your
mean
operation.
the S21 plus hydros are 15 joules a terahash. So our global average efficiency is going to be about 17 joules a terahash once all our upgrades and Paraguay is done, right? So that's going to give us extremely competitive Bitcoin break-even price. It's all contingent on difficulty, but we had some very compelling figures. I think when we announced the Bitmain purchase after, and just using a round number, like if you chose 5 cents a kilowatt hour as your all-in operating cost, electricity, staff, whatever, just to make the math simple, and we expect our costs in Paraguay to be below that, but just use a round number. Our ROI after cost was under 1 year on the ASIC order that we made, which is phenomenal. So you want to target those sub 1 year ROI. I think it was something like 10 months. That is how you make money in crypto mining, because you get those machines plugged in. And by the way, you're underwriting that ROI in bear market economics, like at $60 hash price, $55 hash price. In the bull run, where it gets exciting, if Bitcoin hits 150 or 200 grand, we'll see maybe $100 hash price or $120 hash price. And when you get into that range, that ROI shrinks to under 6 months, right? So you quickly repay the machines, and then for the life of those machines, for that two to 3 years that you're running them, you're just printing free cash flow. And that's where Bitcoin mining is exciting and attractive. It's not just like build, scale, raise more money, plug in more machines all the time without thinking. That's the big mistake that people make. But the way the capital markets are so much hubris, people almost get a big safety net, because they're like, oh shit, we ran out of money, oh, we need more machines, just raise more money, just go buy more. But we try to run Hive to have the best cash flow return on invested capital, right? So are we even making money from mining? Like, I learned crypto mining from guys that were building industrial sites since 2013. And when you're mining and you don't have the luxury of just going to raise all this money, you better make sure that investment, those machines you bought, repays itself and then gives you some profit. Because after 2 or 3 or 4 years, if you're that lucky, when you got to upgrade the machines, you didn't make all your money back from the last investment, you're going to be underwater. Where's the money going to come from, right? And then you're losing money, and you're going through all this work, you're investing the time and the energy. You better be making an actual profit. So that's why it's hard to track the ROI of every different participant in the industry. We can only track our own. But what we can see is from when people are, we can certainly estimate it, right? Like we can see what people are paying, when they're timing their purchases, how quickly they're upgrading. Like people are upgrading way quicker than they should be, just so they can have more headlines. It's like, oh yeah, well, we got new machines and we're constantly growing. But it's just like, you're not giving yourself enough time to ROI. And this is very nuanced, but very important. So for all your listeners that are maybe keen on the art of crypto mining, if you will, on a quarter by quarter basis, right? If a miner, say we've been running 30 joule per terahash machines, those machines have been running for 2 years. Those machines, say they repaid themselves in the first year, if it's a really bad bear market, maybe 1.5 years, whatever. But they're all repaid. And now we're continuing to mine past that 1 year mark into the 2 year, maybe 2.5 year. They're printing free cash flow. So even though their margin, their profit margin may not be as high as a brand new machine, you still want to run those machines until they hit their break even, because that's where all the honey is, right? Like that's just, you're not just showing revenue for the sake of revenue, but you just sunk, $30 million of fresh capital that you need to repay. You've repaid the capital and now you're free cash flowing, right? And so it's oddly enough in the last stages of an ASIC miner's useful economic life, naturally it's tapering off, unless you happen to hit a bull market, but that's when you're free cash flowing, and you want to run that for as long as you can, right? That's not trendy and sexy when you're just an analyst looking at the quarterly margin, because if you just want to show the best margins every quarter, just constantly install the newest best machines, and who gives a shit if they get repaid? Because hey, look at our gross mining margin this quarter, it's so high, all our machines are 15 joules per terahash. And so, don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place to buy new sexy machines, but there's a time and a place to do it, right? So I think the best analysts in the industry get it. I know, we had some great meetings in New York last September, and I got to meet a lot of the analysts from the bulge bracket banks and a lot of the banks that cover us that I think do such a great job. We get coverage from, I was there for the Wainwright conference. We get coverage from Wainwright. We've got B. Riley, Canaccord, Stifel, Northland, and of course the guys at Cantor Fitzgerald do excellent research. So I think those guys get it, but it's helping the retail investor base realize what matters in crypto mining, right? Like, are you really, because of the business, is a going concern, like, are you making money? And we saw in 2022 when companies like Celsius went bankrupt and people get all over leveraged and fall over their skis. So anyways, it's more nuanced, and it's kind of like what I say, it's the art of Bitcoin mining. It's all backed by math, right? But
yeah. It's important because I think the media is probably creating, not helping basically, because they mainly are focused on, big headline, whatever is, power or whatever is the most efficient machine. And that's where the retail investor, most of them they get information, right? So that's definitely not great. Now, you mentioned about some miners, they are relying heavily on convertible notes to raise capital. Is that sustainable? I mean, would you ever consider this approach for HIVE?
I think we've looked at it. We always look at every market trend and we've evaluated it. I think what is not talked about often is there's a lot of cap calls and share buybacks. So for example, what that means, put simply, say, like Iris and CleanSpark had some pretty big headlines. I think they did somewhere, Iris did like 440 million, CleanSpark did like 650 million. But a lot of the proceeds of that goes back to buy back the stock to prevent shorting. And this, when you talk to the investment bankers, they'll say, look, these are the type of hedge funds that are buying in, so you want to do the share buyback to prevent shorting of the stock. And it's a good strategy. It's what you should do. But at the end of the term, like for example, if you borrowed 650 million bucks, but your net proceeds is only 450 million because you did share buyback, you still have to pay back 650 million in a couple of years, right? So, when the time comes to pay the piper, you're going to have to pay all this. So, look, if Bitcoin goes to, I think everyone's just like, yeah, but, Bitcoin's going to go to 200 grand, right? And they're just kind of banking on this future appreciation. So if everything works out perfectly, great. But if it doesn't, what's your downside protection, right? Like, you're going to have a massive convert. And I think that's kind of the thing to consider. But look, Mara, BitDeer, they've all done these big conversions. And what it does actually drives a lot of liquidity because you get a new type of investor because these converts are securitized, right? So that creates a new instrument for people to invest and get exposure to potential equity in your company. So it's really a liquidity driver is what it is. We've looked at it. We obviously haven't pulled the trigger yet. I'm not saying we won't do it, but we've done a deep dive and we've weighed the pros with the cons. So that's what I could say.
Some companies are also using yield strategy to generate extra returns from the Bitcoin they hold on the balance sheet. For example, I think it was Mara that published their results, and that's something they've been stating there. Are you doing anything like that?
That is something that it's the second time that has kind of come up. I think in 2022, these strategies came up, but issues with custody, etc., were of concern. And, when you saw what was happening, where there's a lot of leveraged lending, and you saw Three Arrows and that whole kind of, was it Terra Luna, all going bankrupt because they were doing all this crazy, like, levered lending. And you lend your hard-earned Bitcoin to some company with a bunch of fast-talking startup guys, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to give you this yield, something modest. And you're like, great, we're going to get a yield. Those guys go and do some, like, they've got to outperform that yield. So they're doing some crazy town stuff, and then they fuck up and go bankrupt and lose all your Bitcoin. Who do you point the gun at, right? So we saw that in 20, and then you saw that daisy chain effect. I think people now you're getting probably more sophisticated players attracted to the industry, and I would think that the yield strategies now probably are a lot more well thought out and safer is the word that comes to mind as the industry evolves. But right now, all our Bitcoin on our balance sheet is unencumbered, mined with green energy, of course. And so we've again looked at those opportunities, but currently right now we've got our Bitcoin mined with green energy. Our ATM is performing great to help fund our expansion into Paraguay. And again, we're really trying to have low dilution, low G&A. Our G&A actually year over year went down 5% in our last quarter, while we grew our AI business. So I think we're doing a good job of capital allocation, being disciplined with our company overhead to be a real lean operator. Frank will often talk about how GLD, which was the gold ETF, when that came out, it was a sea change in how all the gold mining stocks were valued. And so, having that awareness, and history can often repeat itself. That's why we're sticking by our morals and sticking by our guns to be a low-cost operator. So we want to give people the best exposure to Bitcoin as an asset class, as a miner and an operator. And that's kind of where the ideology comes from.
Yeah, and being very cautious as well, I think is actually a great approach. Now, HIVE holds over 2,800 Bitcoin on its balance sheet, which I was doing some maths. If we think about Bitcoin being around $100,000, that's roughly like 280 million, which is basically half of your market cap. So it's like the market is not considering, the data center that you have got, all the infrastructure you have in place, the megawatts of power in the pipeline.
Our cool swag.
Why it's there, and also you kind of make your kind of like an acquisition target as well.
So a couple things. Frank and I and our team, we really try to attend all the conferences, tell the stories, be on the panels, do the interviews like this, and you always ask such great thought-provoking questions. We've recently announced that we're moving our headquarters to Texas, and that allows us to get indexed into the U.S. funds, which I think is a big driver of liquidity, but also trading multiple. And you look at the marketing budgets that some of the other crypto companies have, and they're massive, right? Like they're 7-figure marketing budgets, and they're more than our entire corporate G&A, possibly in some cases. When you look at the cost of some of the sponsorships, because the sponsorships at the big conferences, like when you see an entire section of the conference with a logo plastered all over it, that stuff's expensive. So I think that staying true to having low overhead, low G&A, a big part of that is being very mindful of where we deploy our marketing dollars. So it just goes back to do we want to just start spending $1 million to sponsor a conference here and there, or just have that very ubiquitous presence, or do we want to lead by being what we believe is the best value proposition for investors, and organically continue to build the company? And I think as we continue to execute on our growth in Paraguay, etc., and our AI vision to get to $20 million in annualized revenue, I think that we're going to be rewarded in the market. I think the feedback was two things, scale and US domicile. So now we've tackled both of those things. We're in execution mode. And so I think as we execute, we'll be rewarded in the market. I definitely think we're undervalued. I think we're a phenomenal value proposition for shareholders looking for exposure to Bitcoin as an asset class. Like Michael Saylor is brilliant. I was at his 100,000 Bitcoin party in Miami. But to your point, when you look at the companies that have HODL on their balance sheet relative to the market cap, we're trading at a very you basically get for every $1 of HIVE share you purchase, you're getting 50 cents of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, right? I think it's the best way to look at it.
Okay, Aydin, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your updates and how HIVE is keep leading the market. Thank you.
You bet.
Well, busy man, thank you so much, Aydin, and all the best with anything that you're working on. Now, for anybody else watching, we also did a really good interview with Frank Holmes, chairman and founder of HIVE, just before Christmas, where he talked about, different things from the renewable energy side, but also some aspect about Bitcoin, geopolitical, macroeconomics, and obviously is strategy for HIVE. So if you haven't watched that interview, I highly recommend you to look at the link in the description below and make sure that you check the interview out. Now, 2025 is going to be a great year for crypto. Remember, the major Bitcoin conference is coming up in Vegas this year at the end of May, 27-29 of May. We have got a special discount for all our subscribers tickets, so you can use the code FOX10 to get 10% off the price for your ticket. So make sure that you use it, and I look forward to see you there. And I know that Vegas is not really exciting. I mean, it might be for some people, but definitely is not exciting for me. But this year, we are gonna make Vegas a cool city, a place to be for all Bitcoiners that are going to attend. And for the newcomers that maybe they are not yet a part of the community, but they are curious about Bitcoin. And we are all going to be there, able to meet, able to chat. Remember that the Bitcoin community is great, and I look forward to see you there.